I'm Rachel, and today on Crack Your Bible, we're at the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, Illinois, and we are going to be talking about Genesis 7 through 9, where Noah had both the raven and the dove leave the ark before they got off the ark. It's a little too loud to film here, so I will just wait and possibly do a voiceover.
Hey everyone, I'm Rachel, and today on Crack Your Bible, I wanted to talk to you about Noah's Ark, because there's something that's just been like nagging at me, and that is the two birds in Noah's Ark. Now, when the waters began to recede, Noah sent out two different birds from the ark to make sure that animals could find footing, that it wasn't so muddy that they wouldn't be able to walk, and that plants would be able to grow so that there would be food for them, and that would be a sign that they could get off the ark. Now, the first bird that Noah sent out was a raven, and then the second bird that Noah sent out was a dove. Now, a lot of people will say that, oh, the raven, when he flew out, he didn't come back, and that's because he is a carnivorous bird, and there was so much death and destruction in the world that he just feasted on the bodies of all of the dead that died in the flood. And this just doesn't sit well with me. So what did I do? I went back, cracked my Bible, and it's important to go back to the original Hebrew, because Jerome is the one who translated the Bible from Hebrew into Latin. So we can't trust like, oh, King James only or anything like that, because again, the Bible wasn't written in Latin originally. Let's go back to the original. Now, the sentence in Hebrew that is used for the bird, for the raven, it's more like Noah opened up the ark to send out the raven, and the raven was just happy to get out of the ark. But it was too muddy, too wet, so he came back to the ark, but he didn't come back to Noah. And that is not conveyed at all in the Latin translation, and then the English translation's based off of that Latin. So it's important to understand that the raven did come back, and the raven wasn't feasting on the bodies of the dead. And this just, it really irks me, because again, we have to go back to the Bible. What was it like pre-flood? Well, in Genesis 1, God tells Adam and all of the animals what he has given them for food. What did he give them? The flowering plants, the green plants, those are for food for Adam and the animals. It wasn't meat. They weren't carnivorous prior to Genesis 9, when Noah makes a sacrifice and God has his covenant with Noah. Then he says, all animals are now given to you for food, and that you can't eat animals that have the lifeblood in them, and that this covenant, it was between both man and the animals on the ark and God. It wasn't just God and man. And God goes on to say that both man and animals will have to give an accounting before God for the things that they do, as far as, death of others. And this goes right back in line with my video about, do animals have souls? Obviously, yes, if they're going to have to give an accounting before God. Now, I think it's also very important to recognize that the animals that were corrupted, the people that were corrupted, were violent, and yes, they were eating flesh. But that's what corrupted ones did. The ones who had been corrupted by the Nephilim, where they were these hybrids. So of course they would have been carnivorous, and this is something that God had not yet ordained, and this was part of the wickedness that brought on the flood. And whenever people would say, oh yeah, it's the raven, he just feasted on these dead bodies. Why would an animal that was uncorrupted feast on the dead bodies of corrupted, demonic, hybrid creatures? That just doesn't make sense. But from a scientific standpoint, it definitely doesn't make sense, because remember, Noah's year that the flood took place was 385 days. I'll put a link up to that video above. And remember, 46 days into the year is when the flood started. So we have a flood that's going on for 339 days before Noah sends out the birds. I don't know what kind of scientific background that you have, but if you've ever left anything outside that's organic material for any amount of time in the elements, especially if the weather is bad, especially if it's in a corrosive material such as water, you aren't going to have something that's left after 339 days. When something dies, you're going to have the bacteria that's inside of that person or that animal. It starts to eat away inside, and then the body will bloat, which will make that body float. But then either the animals that are in the ocean, because remember, those didn't make it onto the flood, the corrupted aquatic animals weren't wiped out, those would have eaten the bodies. But if it's not eaten, that body over time will eventually sink and then disintegrate. And we see that with animals today. They'll float, and then they get ripped apart, and they get waterlogged, and then they sink to the bottom and they disintegrate. So after 339 days in bad weather, in a very wet environment, those bodies wouldn't be there for a raven to eat. And a raven wasn't carnivorous at that time, and he wouldn't have been eating something that is a demonic hybrid corpse. Now, I want people to understand that there is symbolism between the raven and the dove, but it's not the symbolism that most people assume, where it's like, oh, one is about unbelievers and one's about believers. No, because God, when he makes his covenant with Noah and all of the animals, he says something that's coming from a place of maybe not so positive, like not such a positive outlook for the future, because he says, never again will I completely destroy everything. So he knows it's going to get bad again, but the punishment will not be a complete and total annihilation. So he already knows that sin nature is still in these people and in these animals. And we can see it with the raven and the dove, because when Adam was created, he was given a job, and he was in charge of naming the animals, and he was given dominion over them. So he's the boss, he's in charge. And when Adam died, obviously that job was for all humanity, where animals were in submission to humans. Because remember, animals weren't afraid yet of humans, as we see in Genesis 9. That's part of the covenant, that now animals will be afraid of people. So the animals were under the dominion of Noah on the ark. And when Noah gives the two birds a mission, they're going to be the two witnesses, just like two witnesses are sent out on the new moon, and they have to report back the same thing, and that's how they know it's a new moon. These two birds were to go out and report back, not verbally, but, show that there was plant life out there, that they could actually land. They were the two witnesses, so they were sent out, but one isn't concerned with completing his mission. He's just happy to be out of the ark. He flies around. There's nowhere to land, so he just comes back to the ark, but he doesn't come back to Noah. Whereas the dove, He flies out, flies around, can't find anything, and he comes back specifically to Noah. When he goes out again, he's the only one sent out because he's the only one in submission to God between those two birds. And he brings back an olive branch. And that shows Noah that yes, plants are growing and that animals can get footing. And that's exactly like how it is with Christians today. Because Paul talks about during the judgment of believers, which I've also talked about, that everybody's, Christians are already saved, but our works, what we've done with the tools that God has given us, will be meted out by fire. They will be tested by fire. And if they don't make the cut, then they'll be completely burned up. So you'll still be saved, but you have nothing to show for it. You won't have any of those rewards in heaven. You won't have those crowns to cast at Jesus's feet. So that's what the raven's like. He wants to get the protection and the good things from God, but he doesn't want to go out and do the work of God. He's not in submission to God's commands. That's the symbolism there. You have one where it's like, I have God's protection, I've been chosen, I'm his, but one goes out and he does the works that God tells him to do. He's in submission to God's will and God's order. The other one, the raven, is not. That is what we see with these two birds. And this is also symbolic of creation 3 times, because you have one bird who's in rebellion, you have one who is in submission, that is the harbinger of creation. What happened in the very beginning? You had Lucifer, he already fell, so that whole world that God and the angels were living in, that had been destroyed. Remember Tohu and Bohu, one of my first videos. It was in chaos, darkness, when God created this new creation. God created the heavens and the earth became formless and void. So that's when Lucifer fell. And what do you see? You have this darkness, destruction, chaos, and then you have creation where God is speaking forth all of this stuff, the animals, the plants, humanity. So you have rebellion, then you have God's creation, submission. On Noah, what do you have? You have rebellion towards God. All of these people, they're being dark, they're being like demonic, they're in rebellion to God. Then what do you have? You have creation, submission. And then when Jesus comes back, what are we going to have? We're going to have Armageddon. We're going to have the end of the world. We're going to have rebellion. And then God's going to come back and we're going to be in submission to him and his creation. So that's what those two birds represented. You have rebellion towards God, and then you have submission and creation. And that's what we have 3 times for those 3 different worlds that God has created. Now, you can have multiple symbolism in those birds, so that is the 2 different facets of symbolism. One is that you're saved, but you don't show good works because you don't want to do God's will. And you are just going to sit there and do your own thing, like, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus, but then you're not actually going out and doing the things that God wants you to do. Second one is creation and submission and rebellion, and that's what we see in the symbolism with these birds. So that's just something that I wanted to share with you, and I want people to always be critical. If everybody on all of these Bible sites are saying like, yeah, it's just because he was feasting on the dead bodies, critically think about it, because these bodies wouldn't even be there. That just doesn't make sense, and we can't just continually go off of what we've heard or what we think we know. We need to go back to the source material, not a translation from Latin into English. Let's go back to the original. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I would love for you to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.